Alright, today I wanted to do a video about where to backpack in Pennsylvania. It seems like lately there's been a lot of questions online about where to backpack in Pennsylvania. So I thought I'd go over some of the options. I will specify though that I am only talking about from the Mid-State Trail and west. I haven't done anything really to the east of the Mid-State Trail, so I can't speak to those trails. I do want to specify the difference between hiking and backpacking. Hiking is just going out and walking. Backpacking is basically the same thing, but you're staying overnight in a primitive campsite. You have to be careful about regulations. Now you can hike in city parks, county parks, state game lands, but you're not allowed to camp in any of those places. I am not aware of any city or county park that you're allowed to overnight backpack camp in. The only state game lands that I'm aware that you're allowed to overnight backpack is the section of the AT in Pennsylvania. And there could be regulations against some of those areas also. So I would recommend checking any regulations before you go out. Just Google Pennsylvania, DC, NR to find regulations for any of these places that I'm talking about. Places you are allowed to backpack, overnight camp, would be the Allegheny National Forest. Pretty much anywhere there are a few regulations around the Allegheny Reservoir. You're allowed to pretty much overnight in any of the state forests, as long as it's not more than one night in the same spot. State parks, there are only 4 that I'm aware of that you're allowed to overnight backpack camp in, and you have to stay in the designated shelter areas. You can take tents into some of those. You have to make reservations online. I believe it's visitpaparks.com, something like that. But you can search the individual parks for their regulations. I recommend before you go on any of these trips, do your research, know where you're going, where you're going to be camping. So paper maps, always a good thing. I'm going to show you a few here that I have. These are the kind that the state parks have. You can pick these up at most of the trailheads at the park offices. These ones here are just paper maps I found online and printed. Go to midatlantichikes.com. They have great information on there. There's also the purple lizard maps. These are waterproof, tear resistant. They're pretty good. They cover a lot of Pennsylvania. My favorite ones are, now these purple lizard, they don't have mileages, which I don't like. The Nat Geo maps, they do have the mileages, and these are really good also. Another great reference is Backpacking Pennsylvania by Jeff Mitchell, I think it is, yeah. Although this book is the first edition, this is 2005, so some of this could be outdated. But it gives you some good ideas of where to go. So I'm going to be going over a lot of the trails that he's mentioned in here and a few that are not mentioned in that book. So, and I'm also going to be using, for reference, the map over here. So, like I said, I'm going to be going from the Mid-State Trail to and everything west. So from about roughly there and everything to the west. All this green, that's all state. The dark green is state forests. The light green up here is the Allegheny National Forest. There are a few. It's going to be hard to see, but I thought I'll get a close-up picture of this map later and just do like a photo and put it in there somewhere in the video somewhere. So yeah, so I'm just going to kind of point out the general area that I'm talking about as I do this. Since I've already mentioned the Mid-State Trail, I might as well just start there. Mid-State Trail is it goes from the southern border of PA to the northern border of PA. It's roughly 300 miles, something like that. I've only been on a few miles of it near State College at Rothrock State Forest, which is I highly recommend Rothrock State Forest. That's right around State College, and the Mid-State Trail runs through there. The problem with the Mid-State Trail is there are limited places where you're allowed to camp. A lot of it is private land, a lot of it is state game lands, which you're not allowed to camp on either unless you get permission from the landowner. And pretty much definitely state game lands is a no, except for, like I said, the AT. Another option I wanted to mention is the Hammersley Wild Area, which is a Susquehannock Trail System, the STS. I have not done that one before, so I can't really speak to that, but that's something to maybe research as an option. And we're looking at, like, the Rothrock State Forest is roughly right around there in the center of the state. The Susquehanna Trail System, I think it might be around that same area, but don't quote me on that one. And before I forget, I did want to mention there are a few trails that I am not going to be talking about because they're on the other side of the state and I don't know them, but I hear a lot about them. There's Old Dogger's Path, there's Ricketts Glen, there's World's End, there's Loyal Sock, and those are all up, I believe they're all up in this general area. So something to maybe research if you live out in that direction. All right, moving on, let's jump up to all that green area. Those are all state forests, like I said. To me, that's the most difficult hiking in Pennsylvania. That's the most rugged mountains. You're pretty far out there. Don't count on cell service in most of those areas. First one I'll mention, I'll just run down the list that I have here, is West Rim Trail, the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon and Pine Creek Valley. It's a beautiful trail, great overlooks. Just watch your water sources, do your research online for the water sources on that one, but it's highly popular trail, and for good reason. And I want to say the West Rim Trail is, I'm just taking a guess here, 30 miles long. So, doable in 2 days. Moving on, same area, the Black Forest Trail has a reputation as the most difficult trail in Pennsylvania, and I agree. Of course, I haven't been on all of them, but for me, I did half of the Black Forest Trail, and it was very difficult. Some very, very strenuous climbs. Not recommended at all for a beginner, but beautiful waterfalls. I believe the full loop is maybe 42 miles. I can't remember these mileages off the top of my head. But it's in that same general area. So as I'm looking at my notes here, the Susquehanna Trail System is up around the Black Forest Trail. There's a connector trail, I guess. And then same area again, the two trails that I have not been on that I have heard about that I want to try someday is the Donut Hole Trail and Heiner View. Both supposed to be very, very strenuous climbs. Okay, while I was getting all my notes together for this and looking through Jeff Mitchell's book here, he did mention one in there that I don't hear too often about called the Elk Trail in the same area. Supposedly there's an elk viewing area. I believe it's easily doable in 2 days. I think he said it's 18 miles long, but definitely one that I need to go check out as soon as possible. Okay, next on the list, the Kuhana Trail. I've heard it pronounced so many different ways. I don't know how you pronounce it. Here it is. Kuhana, the QT. I'll just call it the QT, the Kuhana Trail. It's a roughly 75-mile loop, I believe, and there are connector trails. You can cut it into shorter loops. It's very remote. I believe it's in that same general area. I was supposed to do it last spring, but then COVID screwed that up for me. So that's one I need to go back and do. But some friends of mine did it, and they seem to enjoy it. So definitely want to check that one out. Okay, next is the Chuck Kuiper Trail. I have a lot to say about this one. It is divided into West Loop and an East Loop. I did the West Loop, and it was very difficult. I wouldn't say as difficult as the Black Forest Trail, but I think there's more elevation overall, according to Mid-Atlantic Hikes. There's not a whole lot to see. I mean, it's just typical north central Pennsylvania hiking. The trails can be difficult at times. There's a lot of side hilling, which is where the trail is cut into the side, and the trail is kind of sloping. So it's a bit difficult to walk on in places. There are some nice campsites, but there's some really not great campsites. And I may be going back to do the East Loop this year, I'm not sure. Okay, the Allegheny Front Trail. It's right there. It's part of the Moshannon State Forest. There are, it's roughly 40, let's say it's a 40-mile loop. I think we did it in 3 days last year. Great campsites, especially down along the Black Moshannon Creek. Do not drink from the Red Moshannon. You'll poison yourself. You'll be able to tell which one is the Red Moshannon. And there are videos for every one of these that I've done. I have videos in my on my channel. So if you want more info on these, pretty nice campsites on the Allegheny Front Trail. Just be careful about where you camp. In the very center is State Park, which you're not allowed to camp on. I'm gonna say it's the Black Moshannon State Park, something like that. Just, yeah, just don't camp on the state park. But yeah, definitely growing in popularity and for good reason. All right, moving on to this general area around Johnstown and Ohiopyle. There's some really great hiking, backpacking in that area. So starting off with the Lost Turkey Trail. This is a linear trail. It starts, I want to say it's a little bit east of Johnstown. Just be careful about where you camp. I know a lot of it is private land and state game lands. So check regulations on that area. I have not done that one, but I want to say it's a 20-some mile long linear trail. Shared in the same parking lot, and you go across, I believe it's Route 56, is the John P. Saylor Trail. This is a figure-8 double loop. The front loop is pretty nice, the big main loop. All the good campsites are along the creek when you get to the far side of the loop, and there's a suspension bridge. There's a really nice campsite on a little island out there. When you cross and you do the smaller back loop, you'll see some things online that says there's a shelter back there. It's pretty much not usable, so don't plan on staying in that shelter, and don't plan on really getting a whole lot of water on the back loop. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. It's pretty good for a beginner, especially the main first loop. Okay, the Laurel Highlands Trail. I'm very familiar with this one. This is I want to say it's supposed to be 70 miles long, from Seward, PA, which is about 9 miles north of Johnstown, and it ends, the southern end is in Ohiopyle. This is one of those ones where you're required to stay at the shelter areas and make reservations. You can tent. The shelter areas themselves, some of them can be a good mile walk off of the main trail, so keep that in mind. There are some water source issues. A good website to check out is called Dane's Place, and he has some good information on the trail. It's the southern end is the most difficult coming out of Ohiopyle, the first 8 miles. Very steep hills. Once you get up on the ridge, it's not too bad. The northern 20 miles, 15 to 20 miles up north, there's a limited water sources, so keep that in mind. Some of the water pumps don't work in some of the shelters. So just do your research before you go out on this one. But the shelter areas, if anybody has questions, leave them in the comments below and I can give you more detailed information on the shelter areas. But they all have firewood, they all have generally water sources, not all of them. They all have pit latrines, and you can do just day hikes, you can do simple overnights. Just make sure you make your reservations, because I have been checked on by rangers there. Another trail I've been hearing a little bit more about lately is the Bear Run Nature Reserve, which I believe is near Ohiopyle, but it's something I'd have to check into a little bit more in depth. But that's something maybe to check out. So Bear Run Nature Reserve. Okay, trail I really recommend for a beginner backpacker or somebody that just has experience and just wants to go check out a new trail is Quebec Run Wild Area. It is near Masontown, kind of Uniontown area. Definitely, you can camp pretty much anywhere as far as I know. The best campsites are right down along the main creeks of Mill Run and Quebec Run. Absolutely beautiful campsites. And yeah, definitely highly recommend Quebec Run. There's a trail called the Warrior Trail. Runs down in this general area, right around Waynesburg, Greene County. I think it was supposed to be like the oldest trail in the United States. It was like an old Indian trail at one point. The thing about it is, a lot of it's one of those ones where a lot of it is private land that you're not allowed to camp on. So I believe there's only 3 places from what I remember that you're allowed to camp on there. I have not done it just because of that fact. But I believe it's quite a good distance length of the trail. But again, limited camping areas. Okay, Raccoon Creek State Park. Right around there. About 5 miles from where I'm at right now. So I'm very familiar with Raccoon Creek. The main loop is roughly a 20-mile loop. Again, being a state park, you're required to make reservations and stay at one of the 2 shelter areas, Sioux or Pioneer. I recommend the Sioux campsite. The latrines are way more updated. The water pump is much better. You don't have to do the whole 20-mile loop. There are plenty of ways to shorten it. Not a whole lot of scenery on the trail. I mean, you do have the main lake, you do have the mineral springs, but the rest of it is pretty much Western Pennsylvania hiking, but pretty decent for a beginner. So yeah, you can get out and do that one. All right, moving on a little bit more north now to Oil Creek State Park. Somewhere up in this general area. The Girard Hiking Trail. I just finished it very recently, doing the whole loop. I want to say it's 36 miles. Again, state park, you're required to stay at either Cow Run or Wolf Kill shelter areas, make reservations. It's the most, I would say, glamping when you get to camp. They have the latrines, the shelters, you can tent there. They have covered firewood. They have food lockers to put your food in. That's the only place I can think of that has the food lockers, off the top of my head anyways, in Western Pennsylvania. So yeah, I would highly recommend that trail. It's pretty nice. And I did want to mention there are plenty of shortcuts you can use to cut the Girard Trail short. You don't have to do the whole 36 miles. So that's definitely, I would say it's a pretty good for a beginner. There are a few tough hills, but that's nothing too difficult. Okay, the Baker Trail, which runs from, I want to say it's from Freeport, Pennsylvania, which is north of Pittsburgh, and finishes at the southern border of the Allegheny National Forest. Looking at about from here to here. You're going through Cook Forest State Park, which is very beautiful. The problem with the Baker Trail is it's one of those limited places where you're not allowed to camp a lot of places. There are, I believe, 9 shelter areas from what I understand, and I believe they're first come, first serve. I have not done much of it except for the Cook Forest section. Okay, the North Country Trail, the NCT. The NCT is a 44,000 some mile long trail that runs from North Dakota to Vermont, and it runs through Pennsylvania, through Western Pennsylvania in particular. Somewhere down in this general area, runs up through the Allegheny National Forest and continues on into New York. Some great hiking. A lot of the areas down along here are state game land, so there's not a lot of camping available. There are some shelters that are first come, first serve all the way along the NCT. The ones that come to mind are right around to the west of Wampum, PA. There's a new shelter there. There's a new shelter just south of Branchton Road up near Slippery Rock. It's maybe a year, maybe 2 years old at the most. There's one other shelter I'm drawing a blank on right now. Okay, I just remembered it is the shelter at Watts Mill. So, it runs, I think I said before, we're down here. It's kind of up here is where it comes into Pennsylvania. And so the NCT, I'll get more in depth. I'll talk more about the Allegheny National Forest in just a second. And I almost forgot, the NCT runs through McConnell's Mill State Park, which is absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to camp in McConnell's Mill, but continue on into, right next door is Moraine State Park. So you're looking right around that area. You are allowed to camp in Moraine State Park, but again, State Park, you're only allowed to camp at the Link Road shelters, so you have to make reservations. There is no firewood there that I'm aware of. There's no water pump, but there's nearby water. There's a composting toilet and 3 shelters there. So that's an option. It's very easy. Something I would recommend to a beginner backpacker is Moraine State Park, staying at the Link Road shelters. And then the last thing I want to get into is the Allegheny National Forest, right there. So the NCT runs right through the center of Allegheny National Forest from the southern end all the way up to the New York border. I believe it's 96 miles is what the official mileage is supposed to be for the NCT section. You can camp anywhere, and there are a few exceptions in Allegheny National Forest, but pretty much anywhere on the NCT, you're good to go. There are established campsites. There are nice campsites. There's plenty of them. There are shelters here and there along the way, but they're again, first come, first serve, so don't rely on getting a shelter. Water sources are not a problem for the most part, and that I can think of, which I've done almost the entire NCT section and did not have any problems. It's a nice beginner hike. There are some climbs, so take that with a grain of salt. Some of the other hikes that are in Allegheny National Forest, you have the Twin Lakes Trail. That is, I want to say it's a 24-mile long trail. To get to the trailhead, you have to hike in from the NCT to get to the starting point on the western end of the trail. The eastern end finishes at Twin Lakes Park, I want to say, Twin Lakes something. So yeah, there's some decent camping on that one. Yeah, check it out. It's a good trail for a beginner. The Tan Bar Trail is in Allegheny National Forest. I was supposed to do part of it one time, and I was running out of daylight. I was on a kayaking trip, so I never did get to do it. It starts at the Allegheny River and starts with a big climb up the hill and finishes up near Heart's Content. So that's something maybe to check out, something I need to check out. And speaking up by Heart's Content, I don't know that you're allowed to camp necessarily in Heart's Content. Heart's Content is kind of an interpretive trail with 300-year-old trees. But right across the street is Hickory Creek Wilderness. This is a great beginner backpacking trip. It's a lollipop loop, which means, picture a lollipop. You have a connector trail and then you do the loop. The entire thing is roughly 12 to 14 miles, I want to say. So you could easily do it as a day hike. But if you want to camp it, you can camp. There's good campsites. There's 2 campsites at Coon Run, but the really good campsites are at the far end of the loop at Jack's Run. Absolutely beautiful campsites. A real easy, nice flat entire trail. There's not any real climbs. So yeah, highly recommended. The trail in the ANF that I've been hearing a lot about for years and I've never got up there to do is the Morrison Trail. I believe it's a loop trail. So I know it's a very popular trail, so it's definitely something to maybe research and check out. Another one that is in that same general area near the Allegheny Reservoir is the Tracy Ridge hiking system. There's a ton of trails that go through that whole area. I believe the only time I went through there was when I was through hiking on the NCT, so I didn't really check out the entire trail system, but I believe somebody said that there are pit latrines. I can't speak to anything more than that, so definitely something to check out. I hear a lot about that, the Tracy Ridge, and I plan on going back and checking that out someday when I get a chance. And I'll just finish up on the one I saved for last, which I believe is the one I would most recommend, especially to a beginner hiker, beginner backpacker, is Minister Creek. This is, I want to say it's 17 miles east of East Hickory on Route 666. So you park at the parking lot, you go across the street, there are pit latrines, there's a water pump, but you won't need to get water from there. You're not going to need to carry water. You walk up the trail and you come to a split in the trail. I would say stay to the right, follow the north loop, camp out at the far end. It'll meet up with the NCT at the far end. And there are absolutely beautiful campsites out there. On the second day, finish the loop, come back, and there are 2 smaller loops. I want to say it's the west loop and the south loop. I would recommend doing those. There are some nice overlooks in that area, some really nice cliffs. Just be careful. There's one area where there's missing a blaze and it's real easy to miss a turn. Great rock formations. Everything about that trail is great. It's, I want to say, 8 miles long to do the entire loop, roughly. Don't quote me on that. But that's the one I would highly recommend to anybody that's asking questions about where should I backpack in Pennsylvania. Do the Minister Creek Loop. And with that, I'll wrap this up. So if anybody has questions, leave them in the comments below. And see you on the trail.